Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we'll be making Bamia Tabiq. Bamia is Arabic for okra. So it calls for 1 large red onion cubed. It calls for about 5 cups of fresh okra. So when my brother went to the store a couple of weeks ago, he said, "Oh, there's fresh okra for sale." So I thought, alright, great time to make this recipe. When my mom went to the store a couple of days ago, she checked all the stores in my local area, and they were all out. And they weren't selling any more fresh okra. So unfortunately, we have to deal with frozen okra. But if you do have fresh, you're supposed to cut off the ends and leave it whole. And we also, it calls for 3 tomatoes. I'm using diced tomatoes, canned, because we don't have all that many tomatoes right now, and you have to mash up the tomatoes later, so I figured this would be easier. It calls for a stick of cinnamon. I'm using ground cinnamon, probably about a teaspoon I'll use. Half a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of minced garlic. It took me about third to half a globe to get one. Dill weed, half a teaspoon of cumin, and a tablespoon of tomato paste, and about 1 pound to 2 pounds of either beef or lamb meat, cubed. And I can't remember if I said, but the onions also need to be cubed, and the tomatoes. And then we'll also be making Kisra to go with it, and the Kisra calls for sorghum flour and 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Because my mom and I are gluten intolerant, I'm using Bob's Red Mill all-purpose. This recipe is from South Sudan, which is kind of in the Central Africa, and obviously it's south of Sudan. So let's get started. So we're going to start with the Kisra because it requires at least 12 hours to ferment. I'm going to give it 24 just to make sure it gets a little more taste. When you ferment anything to try to make sourdough, you need to use glass because it doesn't absorb the flavor and the smell like plastic would. I couldn't find anything online if it helps the fermentation process, but at least you don't have to worry about it absorbing the smell. So we start with 2 cups of sorghum flour. Okay. Add enough water to make it a thin batter. Stir. Okay, so that's not really thin, but that's okay. We're going to be adding more water later. So I'm going to say that's enough. It's liquidy. And now we're going to cover it with a cheesecloth. And this will allow the dough to collect the natural yeast that's found in the air. So you don't have to worry about adding any store-bought yeast, but it will keep debris out of your batter. And then when you're done putting on the cloth, the cheesecloth, just put it somewhere where it's out of the way and will stay warm. I'm just going to put mine on top of the cupboard. I always like to start the pan on high until it heats up all the way, and then I'll turn it down as I'm cooking. So let's add a little oil to the pan, and then we'll let the pan heat up. So the pot has heated up now, so it's time to add the onions and fry them for about 3 to 5 minutes until they get a little brown and soften up. Now we'll add the meat and cook it for about 10 minutes, and we should stir it every once in a while so that it doesn't burn. So it's been about 10 minutes, so we'll go ahead and add, at this point, the cinnamon. Since we're not using a stick, we're just going to add a teaspoon or 2, of the ground cinnamon, and then we'll add 1 cup of water. Stir it around, cover it, and we'll cook it for about 30 minutes. Our front burner gets pretty hot, so I'm going to move it to the back so it doesn't overcook. So the stew's been cooking for about 30 minutes now, so we're going to add the tomatoes. And like I said, we're going to have to mash them up, so let's push the meat over to one side to make that easier. And then we'll take a wooden spoon, and we just very gently squish them until they're completely mashed up. And as you can see, we can even squish them along the side of the pot. It'll help make it a little bit easier. So I mashed it up as well as I could. There aren't supposed to be any little chunks of tomatoes. There are some chunks. It's more mushy than liquidy. I am completely okay with that. And as you can see, I wound up using my fingers to help speed up the process. Anyway, we're all done here. Now we add the 1 tablespoon of tomato paste. And at this point, if you have fresh okra, you would add it. And I would like to note that I really should have added even the frozen okra at this point. The directions on the package said to cook them for 3 minutes, so I figured I'd just toss them in at the end. But a lot of the okra was still very tough. My family all had a difficult time eating them. Anyway, so we add as much water as needed to completely cover the okra. I'm just adding a cup since I didn't add it at this point. And then cover it and let it cook on medium for about 30 minutes. Now we're going to start working on the kisra. Add that cup of flour to the batter and plenty of water because it's supposed to be thin batter. We need to make sure to get out all of the lumps. So if you saw my video the last time I tried to make kisra, it kept crumbling as I was trying to flip it. It just fell apart. So I think maybe what happened is I used too much oil in the pan. This already has a little oil in it right now because I was using it earlier. So I'm just going to kind of spread that around right now with the napkin. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is, as I keep cooking, I'm going to have to add oil. So I put it in a little tin plate, bowl, whatever, and I'm going to take the napkin and as I need to, just run it across the pan and make sure you use a light pan. So Kisra is supposed to be very thin. Everything I've seen says to use a small plastic scraper. To spread it out, I don't have a small plastic scraper. I'm not interested in buying a small plastic scraper because I'm really not going to be making this very often. So instead, I'm just going to take a small spatula and hold on to the flipping part and just kind of spread it out that way. So we take 1/3 of a cup and pour that out on the pan, and then we just quickly spread it out with our spatula. See, this is the problem I kept having last time. Okay, so that's looking better. So now we're just going to wait till the edges curl up because that means it's ready to remove from the pan. It still looks pretty doughy in the middle, so we're going to let it keep cooking. I'm just loosening up the edges a little bit. Okay, so in one motion, we flip it onto the plate. Oopsie, I crumbled it. So I made the batter a little bit thinner, and I moved the pan toward the back burner, and I have the heat on medium. I'm hoping this will help it cook a little better. I don't know if it's the kind of pan I'm using, but it actually kind of seems to be spreading on its own. I'm just loosening up the edges a little, but I'm avoiding the doughy areas in the middle. Okay, I think that's about right. Okay, so that works. So I guess I just won't spread it, although you might have to. Maybe it's the kind of cast iron I'm using, plus our stove tilts, but it looks pretty good. So it's been about half an hour now, so it's time to add our spices. So we're going to add the garlic, add a little dill weed, half a teaspoon of cumin, and half a teaspoon of black pepper. And then again, if you added okra earlier, You need to stir it very gently so you don't break apart the okra. And as you cook the okra, you may need to add more water because the okra is supposed to be completely covered. So now we cover our pot back up and we simmer it for 10 minutes. So it's been about 10 minutes, so I'm going to add the frozen okra now. Oh dear, it's still a little bit frozen, so I'm going to cook it for a few minutes. I thought it would have been completely thawed out by now because I've had it out for quite a while. Otherwise, I would have been cooking it all this time. Anyway, once it's done cooking, we'll try it out. Okay, so I just realized that I had it turned off the whole time. So I'll go ahead and try it again. As I recorded, or thought I had recorded, the frozen, okra, it said to cook for like 3 minutes. So I thought, okay, I'll just put it in, cook it for a couple minutes. It is still really tough. I think I could have cooked it that whole 30 minutes and it would be okay. And it's okay. It's okay. Not super big on it. Oh yeah, those are still hard. One way the woman said that you could tell when the okra was ready is if the seeds crushed up easily. So it's not as flavorful as I thought it would be. I think it would probably benefit from if I had fresh herbs and spices, but I just wasn't able to afford getting everything all fresh. I will include the recipes, of course, in my description box, as I always try to do. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you try to make it, let me know what you thought of it. Thanks. Bye.